Welcome back to Design Build Workshop. Today we're going to talk about the main building for the factory complex, its completion, and how I actually set up all the 3D printing to make it come out like it did. Kind of see some of the detail. I've got rust coming from where the metal parts are on the bronze plaque. Some of the green verdigris that's coming off of the copper roof pieces or tower roof pieces. And then looking inside, kind of hard to get it to focus inside. But the I-beams or the girders are actually lined up. So like these big pieces right here is right where all the girders are. So they're covered up by one of these. By taking that off, you can kind of see inside. There's the steam hammers and the puddle furnaces. Let's see if I can come down this side. See if you can see in through the windows, which is something I definitely wanted to have so that you could see inside. Once again, there's some glue strings in there that need to be cleaned up yet. Anyway, there it is. One of the first things I want to talk about is basically printing and how I printed it. And I'll give you an example. On these three pieces where these chimneys are, and that's part of the puddle furnace that's inside, these were printed as one piece. So the chimney section and the puddle furnace itself that goes inside the building was actually printed as a single piece. This has the brick design in it, and if you can look closely, it doesn't look too bad, but if you compare the bricks in the chimneys compared to the bricks on the walls, you'll see that the definition is a lot better on the walls, and that's because they were printed, flat when I printed this. And so this, when it was printing the brick section here, it was trying to print those bricks from this position, and even though they don't hang out very far, it's still printing in thin air essentially. But it's not enough of an overhang to really make a huge difference. So I knew, I was pretty confident anyway, that I would get most of the detail in these bricks. But I could tell when you look at it closely, it's not quite the same detail. I'm okay with the way it came out, but if I was gonna print this, for something that was really, really accurate, and I was really concerned about how this was gonna look, I would probably break this up into multiple parts. So I kind of wanted to do a shot. I'm trying to be still so I'm not going to make everybody sick. But bricks in the tower, see how detailed they are? And now look over at the chimney. It looks more like lines as opposed to bricks. And that's the difference between printing that flat or printing it upright. The information's still there, it just doesn't print as well. If you're finding value in this video, please like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. One of the things you think of when you're 3D printing is that I don't have to have so many parts and pieces, I can just print it as one piece. The problem is when you're designing something, you've got to think about the machine that you're using to make what you're trying to design. The 3D printer is great when it prints this way, or if something on a 45, right? When it's working that way, you can really get by with a lot of things. However, if you've got like a big three-dimensional piece, so let's say I took this whole tower section and tried to say, well, let's print this all in one piece, starting from the bottom up. The problem would be with some of these pieces that overhang, right? It's not going to get quite the detail it would if it's laying flat. So when I'm designing something to 3D print, all I'm thinking about is what can I do to position this in a way that gives me the most accuracy and the most detail I can possibly get out of my 3D printer. And so by laying those pieces flat, that's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get the most detail that way. Now, because this is a three-dimensional object, every time I want to lay something flat, that means I've got to have a separate little piece. So the towers are, 4 walls essentially that are all printed flat and then assembled later. The domes are unique as far as anything that's like a dome shape or that curves up or anything that comes up like a pyramid or anything like that. The printer can handle pretty well. And so these were printed as one piece. And as long as you've got a radius on the inside or a slope on the inside, well, the printer can handle that when it's going around. So these, all the tops here, they're just a single piece. So, that's very helpful when you can do something that's got like an arc in them or arch in it. That'll print pretty well from top down. One of the bigger challenges to this piece was the roof. Because I got a little carried away with the inside and detailing the inside of the factory, I wanted to be able to see inside. So that meant making a roof that was designed to be, you could see through. And so this would be more of a modern design as far as a roof, because I don't think they had, back in 1920s, I don't think they had curved, glass or clear acrylic or anything like that for a roof. That's okay, it's my railroad, I'm gonna do it the way I want it. So, but these pieces, basically lift off like this. And I kind of went in another video and covered how these pieces were printed. These were unique as well because, I thought I could print it just like this and it would be fine. But because it was really only connected right on the outside edges, when it was printing, the printer head was catching the little pieces that were coming off, and so it was bumping it all the time and moving it around so it didn't print. So I had to create supports, and like I said, there's another video that will show how these supports were done. What you can see here, and I've got lights in here now, and I'm still working on maybe covering up some of the upper part so you don't see the light come through, you only see the light cast down. But there's steam hammers are in here, which we've already talked about. And then you can see there's a track that's in here. And essentially the track is for pushing the pig iron or the iron that's already been hammered out, it's going to be loaded into that cart, and then it's going to be taken on to the next factory. And you can also see the part of the puddle furnaces that are sticking out. As I said before, were all printed in one piece. And so that's what's sticking out through there. And then I've got a steam boiler, which is over here, which I'm not sure if you can see from that viewpoint, but anyway, that's over here. The steam boiler was printed in half, so a front half and a back half that were put down and then later assembled. For the same reason, I wanted to get the maximum amount of detail on it. I could have printed it, from the bottom up or slightly at an angle and printed it that way. But if I had done that, I wouldn't get the detail that I've got in it right now. The hammers, which I did a video on, were printed in multiple parts. Just for the same reason, to get detail. The only thing left to do on this building is to do the back doors back here, the really large doors that are exit for the material, and then the front door, which is also probably going to be like a copper or bronze. The girders, as mentioned before, were also done in halves, so that when they were together, it's they're dimensional as opposed to just being a flat face. This would have been very difficult to print as a single piece because of the way an I-beam is made, or T-stock is made, and it wouldn't have worked. So printing in that way was the best way to go. I mentioned working as an industrial designer before, and one of the big things you learn that when you're designing something, you have to understand the equipment that it's what's producing the thing that you're designing. And so there are a lot of things that some machines are limited on, so that when you're designing that piece, you've got to think about that, about what the machine's going to do, what its capabilities are. And that's what's important about doing the 3D printing stuff, is that if I want to get the most detail, I've got to think of how I can print it to make it work. Printing it flat in general is going to be your best bet as far as getting the most accuracy and getting the most detail. Only problem with that is you end up with a lot of pieces. So this has got tons of parts to it that all had to be glued up and put together. But for me, the final result is more of what I'm looking for, and I'm okay with taking the time of actually building and putting this together and gluing it up, as opposed to being really fast and print something quick. That's just okay. I would rather have the quality over the speed. So I had someone from a previous video ask me exactly how I go about designing the bricks and what I use to develop, or what the measurements were of the bricks that I made. And once again, in a previous video, I talked about creating one large panel of nothing but brick face. And I have another one of basically board and batten. And I have another one of like corrugated metal. And all I do is, because I've got these big panels, whenever I want to create a new building, I start with that panel and I shape out the windows and figure out the dimensions and everything, so I don't have to keep recreating bricks over and over again, because that takes a really long time. Anyway, the size of the bricks, the long section is 9/100 of an inch. The short section, in other words the side, is 3/100 of an inch. And then I think the depth, yeah, 1/1000th of an inch is the depth. It was good to have you along today on Design Build Workshop and the strategies of 3D printing an HO scale model. So the next part will be the second building that we're getting ready to design, which is on the computer right here. And some of it has already been printed and painted, so we're on our way.